No.
You can go ahead and say that.
Yeah, you can say.
No.
Both Erica and Alex might have problems with that, but
you might have to find 2 new buyers for the business if you say something like that.
yeah. All right, this is the 9th episode of Farm to Markets, where we talk about everything from farms to stock markets. Joining us today is Erica Mork, who's filling in for the vacationing Alex Musso, and it's around fall, so I don't know what Alex is doing, but I imagine it involves lederhosen, and that's all we'll say about that. Today we are talking about why environmentalists are fighting renewable energy development, if you should pay off your house, and barn cats. The Wall Street Journal recently ran a piece about environmentalists fighting renewable energy development due to the fact that solar and wind installations are taking up so much land and may be causing health and biodiversity issues. Joe, does this surprise you?
No, actually, to tell you the truth, when it comes to energy policy, the greatest problem is ubiquity. Whether it's whale oil, or kerosene, or gasoline, or natural gas, or solar power, as long as only the wealthy elite have access to it, it's no big deal. The real ramifications of energy only comes into play when we're dealing with the masses. When gasoline was only used by a few, carbon emissions really weren't a problem. It's only a problem when other people start enjoying it. Now we find out that solar power or solar panels and windmills, they're just not that pretty to look at. Years ago, I had this wonderful idea that I was going to make an incredibly efficient barbecue pit by just digging a hole in the backyard and putting a grill over the top of it. And it worked great. Unfortunately, my wife wasn't all that enthralled with it because it was just an ugly hole in the ground. So I think we're finding that everybody likes solar power or wind power just as long as those ugly panels and windmills are in somebody else's backyard. I'm not in the least bit surprised that people are complaining about our newest form of energy.
Erica, what do you think?
Oh, I happen to be a fan of windmills. I love driving through Judith Gap. I'm often surprised at how often I drive through there and they're not moving at all. And I was surprised to learn that when windmills are tasked with generating power, when the wind is blowing at 35 miles an hour, they have to shut down. And so it kind of makes me wonder just how feasible such a installation would be in Montana, where our wind just seems to be blowing harder and harder and harder. I can understand where people would grow concerned at having such a large tower, especially one that moves with blades in their backyards. But if they're installing them on public lands where there's very little impact to the immediate vicinity, I think they're good. And but it's always not in my backyard. And that is, everyone thinks that is not tied to environmentalists, but I can imagine they're just like you and me.
Drew, what do you think?
Yeah, I tend to agree with my dad and Erica. I think if environmentalists were truly opposing wind farms and solar farms, it would be a bit ironic and almost comical. But I think this article was a bit misleading. It takes 1 or 2 bona fide environmentalists and they ran with it. They say, oh, these guys are representing the whole. Environmentalists are opposing green energy. I really don't think that's the case. As someone who's lived in wind turbine, Midwest USA, I can tell you it's the locals that live there that are opposing it the most. They are unsightful. They're loud. They cast these really annoying shadows in your house. There are a lot of benefits to them too, but I think those decisions should be made on the local level. Let the locals decide whether they want them or not. But this is basic economics. It's people fighting for an optimal allocation of scarce resources, and there's always going to be some degree of opposition. I think in the battle between purity and pragmatism, the desired outcome is the same. We all want clean, cheap, sustainable energy, but this comes at what cost? And that cost the decision of that cost should be made at the local level.
Yeah, and so like with you guys said, I'll probably agree with just about everything, except this is one of those situations where there's no perfect solution. There's only trade-offs, and we basically have to decide what the best trade-off for us is that with the windmills, kind of like to Drew and Erica's point, is that, and I watched the video of this windmill creating a shadow over somebody's house, and you just get this repeated flicker just all day long, and it's pretty bad. If I can find the video, I'll throw it up. And then the other thing is that when the blades in the windmills, they wear out, they have to take them off. And then thousands of these things get buried in Casper, Wyoming. And if you type in windmill blade graveyard or something like that, there's lots of pictures of them bulldozing dirt over thousands of these windmill blades. Same thing with solar panels. You get swaths of land that are just covered with these panels that reflect the sunlight. So when you're driving by, there's a lot of glare in your eyes. And the only other option is to pull oil out of the ground that can be used for making natural gas and gasoline that's used in cars. And then you have the problem of cars driving around emitting CO2 gas, which has been an issue as well. So it's just one of these things where there's going to be no perfect solution. We just have to decide what the better trade-off is.
I think the tension lies in to Drew's point that it'd be wonderful if all of these decisions were made at the local level. The problem is large segments of the population who can vote, they love wind and solar energy in your backyard. So if there's 10,000 people in your community and 1 million people someplace else that wants the wind and solar power, but they want it in your community, the vote is 1 million to 10,000, you lose. Case in point is Martha's Vineyard. Martha's Vineyard off the Cape there, it's got some of the most consistent and reliable wind in the country, but it's perfect for a windmill farm, but they're never going to put windmills out there in Martha's Vineyard because the people who scream the loudest for alternative energy don't want to look out those ugly windmills. So it'd be wonderful if to what Drew said, that it all was decided at the local level. That'd be great. But when you've got 1 million people voting against the 10,000 to put the windmills in the areas where 10,000 people live, it gets a little sticky.
Personally, I would be for a windmill on our property, Dad. They pay you rent for it, and you're being green.
It might be great until the flickering shadow drives you insane.
Yeah, just shut the windows.
All right.
Well, yeah, and the question is that will our neighbors enjoy the noise and shadows?
Touche.
All right. Everyone knows that interest rates on home mortgages are at historic lows. In some cases, individuals are locking in rates in the mid to low 2% range. Drew, should homeowners be paying off their house at these low interest rates?
Should homeowners be paying extra money towards their home, or should they be investing it? Is that kind of the?
Yeah. So is that when you get an interest rate of 2%, and I could get between 7 to 8% in the stock market, should I be paying off my home mortgage, or should I just be throwing money in the stock market?
I think the answer is yes. What I mean by that is I don't think those two options are mutually exclusive. And I think the best approach is actually doing a little bit of both. Anyone who's familiar with our Wealth Builders milestones knows that that is our guide to building wealth and achieving financial independence. And in accordance with that, after you've paid off consumer debt and established an emergency fund, you want to start investing 15% of your income towards retirement. Ideally, that would be in a Roth IRA, employer-sponsored 401k, and or kids' college. Any extra income above and beyond that should most certainly be put towards your home. I'm a big fan of paying your home off as rapidly as possible once you're already doing that about 15% towards retirement in the first place. Now, I will note this is the 30,000-foot advice. Once the door closes behind my office, that advice may be tweaked depending on different financial situations. But short answer is yes. I think it's always good to put extra income towards your home mortgage.
Okay. Erica, what do you think?
Oh, as someone that just paid off her mortgage after becoming a first-time home buyer, I can say it is definitely worth it. And I did go through all the considerations of whether or not I should just, because I had a very low interest rate on my mortgage. And I went through the whole rigmarole as well. Should I just be saving more? Will I be in this house forever? That kind of thing. Am I just throwing my money away, putting it into a piece of real estate that could either lose value like we saw in 2008? But I paid it off and the pandemic hit and I feel very secure. I can't imagine not owning my home right now. And I'm socking away money again. I would not pay off your home if you don't already have a very good emergency fund, because within 3 months of paying off my home, I had to get a new furnace. I had to get a new garage door. I had to get my water, my underground sprinklers fixed. And so I was paying, I thought, my gosh, I've never paid so much out of pocket money in my life. Not only paying off my house, but then having to pay all those expenses as well. And it was a little bit distressing, but we got through it. And I have a home that I call my own. And there's nothing better than that.
Excellent. Joe?
Well, I've been giving advice for almost 3 decades, and much of that advice is the result of talking to thousands and thousands of people.
Yeah, wow.
And I have come to the conclusion that if you want to fill your 82.5 statistical years where you're going to be occupying this planet with the greatest amount of human flourishing, pay your house off as fast as you possibly can. I'm not going to step on Drew's toes because the advice that he was alluding to in our Wealth Masters milestones makes perfect sense. Make sure you're putting money away for retirement. But once you're socking away 15% away for your retirement or your children's education, make accelerated payments against your mortgage. The name of the game, Tom, in retirement is positive cash flow. And even at low interest rates, if you're paying $2,100 a month towards your mortgage, well, if you're still paying $2,100 a month towards your mortgage in retirement, that's $2,100 a month you're not spending right now. So I would say that pay it off as quickly as you can. And like Erica, I've bought several houses and I've paid off all of my properties as fast as I possibly could because I prefer cash flow than leaving my kids a whole bunch of extra money as a result of using the power of leverage. Sorry, Drew.
It's all right. I do too.
I obviously agree with everything you guys said, or I wouldn't work here. The point I will make is that obviously, you want to be investing, like as Drew said, you want to be investing at the same time you're paying off your house. There's a case to be made where instead of making extra payments towards your house, you put them in the market because the 8% return is well above the 2% return the guaranteed 2% return that you get paying off your house. But just like any financial model, the longer you go out in the future, the less reliable that becomes. So we don't know what's going to happen in the economy. You don't know if you're going to get hit by the chicken delight truck, but having a one less payment that you have to make is going to make your life that much riskier. There's a reason why the 30-year Treasury has a higher yield than the 5-year Treasury, as most of it is because we don't know what's going to happen in the next 30 years.
Well, there was an old saying that Joe Kennedy, the father of John and Robert Kennedy, once said that he got out of the stock market when he started getting stock advice from his shoeshine boy. And I can tell you that years ago, when the real estate crisis and the real estate bubble burst back in 2008, many of the clients that I had were cashing out IRAs, paying horrendous penalties and fees and taxes to invest in real estate, only to have the value of their real estate drop 40% at exactly the same time they lost their job. I, on the other hand, was doing the exact opposite. I was making accelerated payments against my house and got it paid off by 2005. And when 2008 hit and my income dropped almost by 2/3, it was inconvenient, but it wasn't catastrophic because there was no way I was going to lose my house. And like I stated earlier, to get the greatest amount of life for the greatest number of years, having your house paid off is a level of security that it's really hard to explain until you actually do it. When you walk around your backyards with your shoes off, the grass just feels differently beneath your toes, and the air just smells sweeter when your house is paid for.
Perfect. All right, we'll move on to barn cats. So is that barn cats prey on assorted vermin such as rodents and other small animals in or around barns. It's possible to get the same results using mouse traps and other methods, which raises the question, is it necessary to have a barn cat? And we'll let Erica answer first. I know you're more of a dog person, but why don't you give us your 2 cents on what you think about this?
Yeah, well, I never dreamed that I could become so enamored with barn cats once I was tasked with this topic. I am not feline friendly. I have a neighbor cat that has gone through my yard and taken away all the birds that I would love to have. My dog leaves them alone. But I decided to take a look at barn cats, and the Flathead Valley has a wonderful barn cat program, the Flathead Valley Humane Society, I should say. And I did not realize that barn cats could be such a wealth of well, the topic of barn cats could be such a wealth of information. There are hundreds and hundreds of YouTube videos out there for you to watch about raising barn cats. And raising barn cats is not just about going to the shelter and getting a barn cat and turning them loose. You have to home them, you have to feed them and shelter them, you have to make sure that they feel at home in your barn. Otherwise, they're just going to run off to the next field. But they are very successful, and they hold up, if not outdo, your pesticides, your traps, the various peanut butter or cheese or water drowning vessels that you can use to catch mice and other rodents that inhabit your farm. But the only way that you're going to get through, though, is to have a tidy barn, which you may not really want to have to deal with, but a tidy barn, a tidy garden, and then introduce your barn cats and be ready to fall in love with them, because I did fall in love with several barn cats that I met on YouTube, and I may not be so anti-feline after that.
All right, Drew, you want to give us your opinion?
I don't have a lot of experience with barn cats. I am hemming and hawing as to whether to get a barn cat or not. So this is a perfect topic to discuss and hear everyone's thoughts. Overall, without having any experience, I think they're a net benefit on the farm. But I do want to proceed with caution, because anyone who's managed a biodiverse plot of land knows that any slight changes can have butterfly effects. Before you know it, you're George Bailey and It's a Wonderful Life, and everything's changed. Sure, the cats might eliminate some of the rodents, but who's to say they won't hunt the chickens or the quail? They might draw larger predators to the property. They might run off the ducks and the geese, which might cause an overgrowth of aquatic plants. So I'm just thinking of all the scenarios that could happen. I don't think they will, but like I said, I'm just going to proceed with caution if I do ultimately get a barn cat.
Okay, and I'll go next, and because Joe has a Kubota tractor and a Carhartt jacket, and everybody knows that's like having like an MD and a PhD on the farm. So I'll let you have the last word on it. To Drew's point, I did read you could train barn cats not to attack your chickens and your ducks, although I would not want to take on that responsibility. I'm going to come down on as a pro barn cat for 2 reasons. One, as I know I have a couple of friends that have barn cats, and they're pretty smart people, so that's going to be good enough for me. And 2, the most compelling reason that I found to have a barn cat, and I found this in a number of sources, was, quote, they make the barn a happier place. So that's it for me. I'm pro barn cat. And Joe, why don't you tell us what you think?
My worldview towards cats in the past have always been, whenever I'd see one walk across the street, I go, oh, there goes half a great pair of slippers. But having watched Drew and Kayla have the wind sucked out of their sails when all of their vegetables were destroyed by ground squirrels earlier this summer, and then when my potatoes started getting munched on by voles and mice, I came to the conclusion that we were going to come up with some solution to our vegetable destroying problem. Doing some research to, like Erica was talking about on YouTube, came up to the conclusion that the smartest and most efficient way to get rid of my rodent problem is by getting a couple of barn cats. So even though I'm not a big cat fan, I'm even less of a fan of mice, voles, and ground squirrels. So I'll be getting a couple of barn cats before next planting season. And to Erica's point, I will be putting them in a dog cage for about 3 weeks to get them accustomed to staying in the barn. And I'll make sure that they know that they'll consistently get their food from us on a regular basis, so they feel like living at my place is better than going to somebody else's place. And then finally, I'll be making sure that whatever type of cat I get, male or female, they'll be spayed or neutered before they come onto the property. But overall, I'm not a big fan of cats as pets, but as a working animal, I think they're going to be a nice fit on the Coco Cabana farm.
All right. Well, that's it for episode 9. Remember that if you want to participate in our discussion, you can actually leave a comment below. And if you have something that you want us to talk about, you can also leave that in the comments section below. So far, we've only had like one person commenting. So if you want to participate, let us know. Otherwise, we'll see you next week.